Thank you for turning to 10, your news leader. 10 News Conference with Gene Valicenti continues right now.
People, readiness, modernization, and partnership illuminated by transformation and underpinned by a culture of dignity and respect is our roadmap for the future.
And welcome back. I'm Brian Crandall, in for Gene Valicenti this weekend. My guest today, you just heard from there, is the new Adjutant General and Commanding General of the Rhode Island National Guard. In short, the general in charge of the military force in Rhode Island. It's Brigadier General Andrew Chevalier. General, thanks for joining us here on 10 News Conference. Congratulations on the promotion. You've been in the Rhode Island National Guard for 35 years, just named a couple months ago to take over for the retiring General Callahan. So you've been around. So you've seen how it works, but you must have had some ideas along the way, as most of us do, when we're like, oh, if I was in charge, what am I going to do? So what's your agenda? What do you want to do off the bat?
Yeah, first, thanks, Brian, for having me on the show today. As you might have just seen, my priorities, similar to the governor has a 2030 plan for Rhode Island, I have my own Rhode Island National Guard 2030 priorities, and they're basically nested together as well. But my number one priority is our people, our soldiers, our airmen of the Rhode Island National Guard and their families, and then the readiness of those soldiers and airmen to fight and win our nation's war if called upon, and also to support the state in times of emergency. In modernization along different domains, but modernization of our systems, of our facilities, of our equipment, and lastly, partnership internally, partnership with our interagency partners, with our community organizations, and in partnership with our federal and international partnerships.
Give us a status check. As we were talking before, for years we'd covered deployments when America had troops overseas in Iraq and Afghanistan. You've been deployed yourself to Iraq and Kuwait. Where do things stand now? It seems calmer.
It is. I would suggest to you that we're in a bit of a reconstitution phase. In calendar years 2023 and 24, we were actually at our highest mobilization rates for the Rhode Island National Guard since 9/11, and then. But now we're we have just a few folks deployed, different missions throughout the globe. But we look at over the next 12 months that pace picking back up and deploying a small amount of folks, soldiers and airmen out to support global operations.
So you've already gotten some orders?
We do.
Can you share any of them, or is that classified?
No, it's not. Classified. Largely it will be to support some engineer ops operations out in the to support United States AFRICOM, and then we also have some airmen and soldiers going out to support our efforts, global efforts in in Asia and under the United States Central Command.
Now, when you came in at the beginning of the year, basically, we also got a new president just around the same time, and people want to know, are things going to change with the military? There's a lot of uncertainty, whether it's, the situation with Ukraine or in the Middle East. And do you have any sense of anything changing on that realm, or are you and your folks just waiting to see what happens like the rest of us?
Well, change, is since I came in the National Guard in 1989, we've had change all along, and whether that's been driven by an administration or not, it's, so we are changing along with time. I see a lot of changes coming, based on innovation and technology, and those I always look at as change. Look at the opportunities that are there, opportunities for us to change, to better support our nation and to support our state in times of need.
And the president, shortly after taking office, declared an emergency in terms of immigration and the border, and that would allow him to use the National Guard. Is that something you have talked about potentially, or do you think, being from Rhode Island, that's not necessarily going to happen, that you wouldn't have a unit to do that, or is anything on the table?
A fair question. Support down on the southern border is not something that's new. There's certainly an increase in the number of active duty troops down on the southern border. Here in Rhode Island, the Rhode Island National Guard. There's no appetite to stand up the National Guard to go and support that type of activity, and we take two oaths. We take an oath to our nation and an oath to our state. And I serve and advise the governor, and I will continue to support his policy.
And just to be clear on that, would it have to go through the governor first for something like that to happen?
That it's a complex issue and almost counterfactual to what is happening right now. Right now, there has been no request for assistance for the Rhode Island National Guard, but it is a complex issue. And currently, the Rhode Island National Guard here in Rhode Island serves under the control of the governor.
And I see you kind of wade into a political issue a little bit in terms of how the National Guard is used. You wrote an opposition letter last month to a bill at the State House that also has some companions around the country that I think is labeled Defend the Guard.
Yeah.
And if I read it right, would require that there would have to be a declaration of war for National Guard troops to go overseas. It was introduced in Rhode Island by a couple of Republican lawmakers. You're opposed. Why did you oppose that?
Yeah, well, thanks for bringing that up, Brian. So that, well, first of all, I just want to be straight that Defend the Guard I think is a poor name for that, because it is not good for the National Guard. It is not good for the state, and largely my other colleagues, the other adjutants generals, are right in line with that school of thought. There are many instances on mobilizing the National Guard short of Congress declaring war.
Yeah. You want to be able to go overseas to support these other
exactly
things, like you said you may be doing soon.
Exactly, like our state partnership program with Timor-Leste and the Bahamas. We go on a Title X mobilization status. That type of legislation could potentially interfere with that. We take an oath, again, to serve our state and our nation, and this is getting a little bit in the weeds, but back in 1903, there was the Dick Act that really modernized our National Guard, and it basically said that the federal government will pay to train and equip the National Guard, and they will be maintained, controlled by the governors, but they can be called upon, by the president. And so, if we're not going to stay true to that, going back in history, then it would question our funding from the federal government, which is more than 95% of the funds that we receive.
And you feel like this kind of would pull the rug out a little bit from what you do?
Yes.
And I was going to say, we're talking about military operations and overseas stuff, but I think the role we saw the Guard in most high profile in the last few years was the COVID response. What did that teach your folks? Was there a lot of attrition after that? What has been the fallout from all the work that you did, whether it's readiness for the next thing or how that affected the National Guard? Because you guys were at testing sites, you guys were doing all kinds of stuff, standing up field hospitals. What's the lesson learned and what's come out of that?
Well, I would tell you that one of our successes in our strength, we are at 100% strength within our Army National Guard in the mid-90s for the Air National Guard, and one of it is attributed to retention. People join the Rhode Island National Guard and they love it and they stay in. Part of that was their ability to serve their state during COVID, and so the opportunity that a lot of our service members had, they bring that home to them, and they're from all over Rhode Island. They're our hometown team, and what they learned during that, and those intangible skills, the soft skills of leadership, and how to be innovative, transfers to readiness today.
And is that one of the big focuses too, because you do have an emergency management component. Is that a focus, more of a focus now, like on potentially responding to some sort of pandemic or outbreak or something like that, as much as you were going to do before with like a hurricane or something like that?
It does. And you know, one of my jobs is serving as the Homeland Security Advisor to the governor, and I will share with you in the audience today that there should be a very high level of confidence, you know, that under the governor's leadership, myself, we work with the Rhode Island Emergency Management Agency, the Rhode Island State Police, the State Fusion Center, and we have representation from Homeland Security, the FBI, and there's a very flat level of communication on concerns that run the gamut, that we could respond and weigh in and you know, use some of those things that we've learned in the past.
One of the other most high-profile things that the National Guard used to do was the air show. And we haven't seen that since before COVID for a variety of reasons, whether it was deployments or funding or whatnot. So it was the last one, I think, in 2018. And I know you've moved to a high school STEAM event that instead for the last few years. Will we ever see the National Guard involved in an air show again, do you think, or at least under your watch?
So the air show, I will tell you, Brian, you know, it is near and dear to my heart. I spent a lot of time supporting that air show and making sure it was successful. Having said that, times have changed, and the environment has changed, and for a positive way for Rhode Island. I would welcome to bring you down to Quonset and drive you around inside the fence line down at Quonset, to drive you outside in the industrial park, and you will see all the sprawling buildings, the industry that's there. So we cannot safely bring in 50,000 spectators on, you know, a Saturday or a Sunday and safely, you know, run that air show. I'll also say, in line with my priorities, it does deter from our readiness, and it takes a whole year of a lot of people doing a lot of coordination to run that air show. So it's honestly, we wouldn't be able to do it safely, and it deters from my priorities of readiness to support the state if needed it in our nation.
Okay, well, thanks for that update. And I know they're doing a big renovation of the airfield down there as well. Well, Brigadier General Andrew Chevalier, thank you very much for your time and joining us on 10 News Conference, and we look forward to seeing you down the road.
Thanks, Brian.